Controlling the sound in your recording space will make the most significant improvement for your voiceover recording quality, and it doesn't have to be complicated or expensive to accomplish. We're going to take a look at how some small adjustments made a huge improvement for one of my clients. I'm Lenny B, voiceover audio engineer. I help voiceover actors and creators win more auditions and elevate their career. Let's make your voice sound better. This submission was from Jim Pearson Perry. It was recorded on a TechZone Stellar X2 microphone into a Grace Design M101 preamp, then into a Focusrite Scarlett 4i4 interface. And he uses Adobe Audition software, and he records mostly non-fiction audiobook narrations. And you can hear that in the example here. We had to go through back and forth testing. He sent me several files, and this was the first one he sent me. Let's take a listen.
Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland. They usually affect distant target tissue.
Now, right away, I heard a resonance in the room. It's kind of a mid, high mid, and a low reflection sound that was coming into the recording. Basically, what that is the microphone is picking up not just his pure voice, it's picking up some of the reflection in the room as well. And that gives it kind of a blurry sound. It's not what we're looking for when it comes to voiceover. Let's listen again, and you can hear the reflection. You can hear the room.
Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland. They usually affect distant target tissue.
So we went back and forth, and I said, I'll tell you what, let's see if we could modify you in your room. And he does have a little bit of sound treatment, and I said, okay, let's see if we could modify the setup a little bit. And I had him send me another clip, and this was him rotating at a 90-degree angle. And we're going to take a look at what this sounds like. So he in the room was literally rotated 90 degrees, and I wanted to see if maybe the reflections would be different, and maybe the sound treatment that he did have would absorb the reflections facing the microphone. And here's what it sounded like.
Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland. They usually affect distant.
It was a little bit better. And then I said, all right, let's rotate you 180 degrees so you're facing the opposite direction and see what that sounds like. And here's the clip he sent me.
Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland. They usually affect distant target tissue.
Still the same type of problem. And at this point, we are still using the Stellar X2 microphone by TechZone. So then I said, all right, do you have any other mics? And he said, yes. We wanted to make sure it wasn't the mic that was causing the problem, because originally that's what we thought. And so he did have a Rode NT1, which is a very popular voiceover microphone. And I said, okay, let's stick with the 90-degree rotation, because that sounded the best so far, better than the original position. And this is what the NT1 sounded like. And mind you, this is no processing. These are all raw files.
Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland. They usually affect distant target tissue.
So I hear a different type of reflection. It's still changing. So to me, that makes it sound like the reflection is there. It's not the particular microphone. It is the microphone in that room with his voice and the reflection. So it's all playing together. And I thought, well, we're going in the right direction. Then I asked what is in his recording booth. Does he have a large TV screen or a monitor? Is he close to a wall? So he basically had a sound blanket tent, and I did notice that there was a pretty large screen. He did have some foam, 1 or 2 inch foam panels that were hanging inside the booth, and we arranged them a little bit. And I also noticed the desk and the table, and I said, okay, let's make some more adjustments. And so we used the Rode NT1A at a 90-degree angle, and we removed the table, and we added some foam directly behind the microphone, and that's what this sounds like.
Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland. They usually affect distant target tissue.
And again, we got a different result, and I still think I'm hearing the room, and I'm thinking, wow, we're still moving in the right direction. Let's keep going. So I said, all right, do you have another microphone, a dynamic mic? Is that possible? And he did, and we had an RE20. Now, he was fortunate enough to have a bunch of different microphones that we could test, because he also had been trying to figure out the issue. So I said, all right, let's use the RE20 at a 90-degree angle, no table, and the no foam. We moved the foam around, and that's what this sounds like.
Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland. They usually affect distant target tissue. Hormones vary in their range of targets.
And we've made some serious progress, but we uncovered another problem. Since it's a dynamic microphone, it needs some more gain, so we had to do some adjusting with his gain staging. Because of the way that dynamic microphones work, it did not require phantom power, but we needed some more gain with the preamp, and he has a very nice preamp, that Grace. So after a little bit of gain staging adjustments, we finally landed on this, the RE20 at a 90-degree rotation from where his original position was. We removed the table and we moved the foam into the different position. And we did some of the gain staging with a ratio between the preamp and the Focusrite 4i4. And that finally brought us to this result.
Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland. They usually affect distant target tissue. Hormones vary.
So now let's listen to the original first Stellar X microphone in the position, and then we'll jump back to the RE20 and the final version that we landed on.
Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland. Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland.
So now I've got something that I could work with, and we can optimize this with the processing, because we removed all those reflections. The microphone that we chose is now picking up mostly his pure voice, and it's not picking up those other frequencies reflected in his room and not being absorbed by his room treatment. Now here's the concept that I really want you to learn here. The room is the absolute most significant contributor to the sound of your voiceover. To get an excellent voiceover sound to begin with, before processing, you need to control the acoustics in the recording space so that your microphone is picking up mostly your pure voice and not those voice reflections from your room. The processing is either going to be used to try and fix the problem if you're capturing reflections, and it'll help, but it's not going to give you an amazing result. On the other hand, if you can get a configuration that picks up mostly pure voice, then those plugins like compression and EQ are going to optimize the sound, and you don't have to worry about using EQ or other kind of restoration plugins to try to remove that echo. And ultimately, it's going to give you a better sound. So the microphone in this case wasn't the issue. It was the mic in that room with that physical room and treatment configuration. And why did the RE20 work better? Well, dynamic mics are they're a little less sensitive to high frequencies, but they're not as sensitive as a condenser microphone. Condenser microphones are fantastic for voiceover, but you need to make sure you have great room treatment and a good sounding room with no reflections. Large diaphragm condenser microphones are even more sensitive. So it really depends on what you're working with in your room. And I always say that, room treatment is not a very sexy thing to shop for or buy, but an investment in proper room treatment or good room treatment to diffuse or absorb those reflections in your recording space, wherever you're recording voiceover, it's going to give you the most noticeable difference in improved quality. You can have a $3,000 microphone in a bad room, and I could make a $100 microphone sound better in a properly treated room than that very expensive microphone. Your sound begins in your room, so room treatment is extremely important to get a great sound. So now we've got the sound on the RE20. It's the best that we've had in the room. We did the gain staging to get the best sound possible as a raw file. And that's when I started doing some EQing and processing the voice, first with the F6 by Waves. It's a fantastic parametric EQ, and I corrected some of the overabundant frequencies. Let's hear the before and after.
Hormones are chemicals secreted by a gland. They usually affect distant target tissue. Hormones vary in their range of targets. Some types of hormones combined with compatible receptors found in many different cells all over the body.
Right away you can hear the voice becomes like right in your face, because really what we're doing by lowering certain frequencies that I found were overabundant, you're balancing the frequencies, and it kind of unblurs the audio because it's more crisp. It's giving you a more true representation of his real voice. Let's hear the difference again without and then with the EQ.
Other hormones are more specific, targeting only one or a few tissues. Additionally, the same tissue can act as a target for many different hormones.
So once we had the EQ activated, we moved over to one of my favorite plugins for voiceover, the Sheps Omnichannel by Waves. And I've got links in the description of the video for both of these plugins. It's a fantastic multi-effects plugin because it has a preamp with a little bit of saturation, which we used. I didn't use any of the filters. You did see that I removed some of the frequencies below about 65 hertz, so it's a low-pass filter. I took care of the low-end garbage there with the EQ. Then I used an expander to quiet down the noise in between his words, but I set the attack and the release so it's very transparent. I did use a little bit of a de-esser, actually in two different frequency spaces. The second one here is a little lower at about 41 kilohertz, and then the higher one's about 63, maybe 64 kilohertz, with the wider of the two curves. And we are attenuating those frequencies with a de-esser only when they're apparent. And then I use the EQ, which is my favorite part of this Sheps Omnichannel plugin. It's a fantastic sweetening EQ. The highs give it the wonderful air. We're using the mid just to give it that presence and really that crispness in his voice so it becomes really intelligible. We dropped a little bit of the low mid around, where is this? This is around 3,500 hertz to remove some more of that boxy kind of bassy buildup. And then the really low stuff we use with the resonance peak, 88, just to give it a little warmth and girth down there. And then we used a couple of compressors, and I use these pretty commonly. First, a very transparent Vca compressor, and I have a fast attack and a fast release, and I'm only getting just about 1 to 3 dB of gain reduction at the highest peaks. And then I'm using a second opto compressor, really at a slower attack and release, just to smooth things out. And let's hear the difference now with and without the Sheps, while keeping the parametric EQ engaged.
There are two classifications for hormones, either based on how they travel within the body or based on their chemical structure. Autocrine, paracrine, and synaptic are three types of local hormone signaling. Autocrine signaling is a situation when hormones from the same cells affect other processes within the secreting cells.
It's like removing a blurry filter from your audio. It really crisps things up. And one of the other things that Jim had asked is, he said, I do use some restoration plugins because there's a lot of clicks and pops in his delivery, and that's just kind of natural. And, my goal is to make sure that he's comfortable and is confident with his sound. I don't want him to be insecure about anything. So when he records, he knows it's going to sound great. So I used a couple RX plugins. I use the Mouth D Click from Isotope and the Spectral Noise Reduction, which I think is really good because I'm able to use both of these in a very transparent way. So here's what it sounds like with everything on, and I'll take it all off and then put it back on again so you can see the difference with all of the processing together.
In paracrine signaling, hormones are released into the fluid between cells and diffused to nearby target cells. Synaptic signaling is a more specialized signaling that occurs between neurons and between neurons and muscle cells, allowing nerve cells to talk to each other and to muscles. The many different hormones in the human body can be divided into classes based on their chemical structure: lipid-derived, fatty acid-derived, amino acid-derived, and peptide and protein hormones.
And I'll point out that I do make sure to gain stage between all of these plugins. So what's going in to the effects chain is exactly what's coming out with an integrated loudness. So you'll see, I'll keep these on and we'll play the last bit here, and you can see the level is very, very similar from what's coming in, which is this meter, and then the plugins are between it, and then this is what's coming out, and you can see the similarity in the level.
Lipid-derived hormones are mostly derived from cholesterol. If a hormone is amino acid derived, its chemical name will usually end in INE.
So were we able to make the audio in his room absolutely perfect? No, it was still an issue, but it definitely was workable. I want to point out again that I don't think the mics were necessarily faulty. We just needed to find which one captured his voice more than his room in that specific situation. All rooms are different, all voices are different, and in this case, the RE20 yielded the best result to reject the sound we didn't want and to capture the sounds we did. I want you to have confidence. I don't want you to have that little voice inside your head every time you record for a voiceover going, is this good enough? Can my voice sound better? Am I using the right microphone? Do I have too much EQ? And, it goes on and on and on. When you have the confidence of knowing that your voice sounds great, you'll actually do better, and that is magnetic. The people listening to your demos, the people listening to your auditions, they hear that as well. The website is lennyb.com for voiceover training courses. All the details on my custom processing service are up there as well. And just like Jim, you could send me your voiceover. There's a simple form with the instructions for how I need to receive your voiceover file. It's lennyb.com and look for the red button at the top of the page. Or you can get here from the link in the description. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one, and leave those comments and questions. I'll do my best to answer all the questions I can. And if your voiceover sound is not inspiring you to do better, if you're not happy with the sound, if you feel like it's maybe preventing you from reaching your goal, let's make your voice sound better. I'm Lenny B, voiceover audio engineer. Thanks for watching.